Alright, the number 14 EL brake equipment lubrication brake cylinder. The duplex cylinder figure 22 can be lubricated without opening it as follows. Remove the upper 1/8 pipe plug from the center portion of the cylinder. Attach the approved pressure gun to the each connection and inject about 2.5 center cubic inches of brake cylinder lubrication. Replace it with 1/8 inch pipe plugs. Remove the 1 inch pipe plugs from the outer end of each of the non-pressure heads. Attach the pressure gun and the injection about 1/4 inch cubic inches of the brake cylinder lubrication. This will lubricate the piston rod bearing of the lubrication seal with the non-pressure head, replacing 1/8 inch pipe plugs. When the cylinder has been re-lubricated, check the test shows obtain external leakage, but the cylinder must be dismantled with the fault determined with the remedy. Each of the pistons should be removed with the non-pressure end of the cylinder. This brake pressure does not have the follower the bolted, but the position of the way to go. Packing covers the entire piston head is arranged so that it snaps onto the piston and held under place bead on the piston, which fits into the non-pressure side of the packing. When the cylinder is dismantled, the packaging must be removed and cleaned and inspected. If there are any cracks or deep scratches in the backing bearing surface, is the packing worn too much to hold the proper bearing on the cylinder wall, it should be replaced. Before new packings are fully applied, the felt swabs, the pistons may be carefully cleaned and re-lubricated just so that they will be in full contact with the cylinder wall. When the pistons are replaced, the cylinder must be cleaned so that they remove all the dirt and old lubricant, with the walls re-lubricated with an improved brake cylinder lubricant. When the cylinder is dismantled, release the sprinklers and must be inspected and if necessary cleaned, but is removed any rust dirt which might later find its way through the cylinder walls. If sprinklers shown any rust spots or any should be covered with an improved rust prevented after the cleaning. The hair strainer of the piston rod seals when each of the pressure had been dismantled and inspected. The strainer can be removed from the inside of the head of the inspection. Its head may be placed with the wire spring by the closing end of the spring. The strain parts are released from removal. The strainer should be replaced by cleaning one of the dirty strainers taken to the shop for inspection, cleaning, and reconditioning. If necessary, if the seal rings are not tight on the piston rods, they may be replaced. If the reassembly of the dismantled brake cylinder must be done of special care to ensure that no dirt or other foreign substances can get inside the cylinder before it is closed. The brake valve. A good grade of graphite grease is recommended for the use of the brake valve with the rotary valves whenever it can be conventionally applied with this assembling device after overhauling the repairs. However, this graphite grease can be used conveniently for lubricating for the valve. The others assembly, a good grade of the oil should be used in such a way whatever lubricant used should be applied very sparingly. The equalizing piston should be removed and the bushing thoroughly cleaned with the cloth saturated with a good grade of oil lubricating filled with the pores of metal with the oil when wiping out the cleaning with a cloth. The piston of the ring shall be immersed in cleaning of gasoline and blown off with air and wiped dry with a clean cloth before clean piston is replaced. Within the bushing, 3 drops of approved oil must be placed to the groove and the piston removed with among the distributed with the oil. Insert with the piston to insert with the innermost position of the bushing and lubricated with the bushing. Sparingly move the piston back further several times, after which remove the surplus oil with the outer edge of the bushing. If brake valve cannot be conveniently removed from the lubrication, hard working the handle may be remedied. Close the first double heading of the cutout cock, then the main reserve cutout cock, and after the pressure has been blown off, remove the oil plug with the valve body, filling the oil hole with a good oil, with removing the handle, and a few times between the release and emergency position to give the oil a chance to work in between the rotary valve and the seat. After the operation, again with the fill with the oil hole, replace the oil plug. Next, remove the cap nut in the rotary valve key, fill the oil hole, push down the key, then fill the oil hole again. After removing the handle a few times, replace the cap of the nut. If the independent brake valve handle works hard, and it should be similarly treated at this time before opening the main reserve and the brake valve cutout cocks. Your distributing valve. No, remove the movable parts of the distributing valve while it's on locomotive. If the valve portion is not working properly, needs cleaning and oiling. Remove the reserve portion, replace it in with the valve portion in good condition. All cleaning oil should be done at a bench or a competent man, whether liability of the damaged internal parts of the valve is least to any type of the valve with the portion apart with still the locomotive is almost sure that the result in the large percentage of the valve being injured by a careless handling of the dirt getting inside the valve. The repairs, if necessary, should be returned to our shop. For the purpose, our facilities are for doing this work. The maintainable standards are the best. We can therefore do it more quickly and accurately and guarantee better satisfaction than where it should be handled by other shops not so well equipped. Furthermore, it is an uttermost importance that the manufacturer standard to be departed from the other parts of the apparatus in order to be perfectly interchangeable. The proper specified cleaning period of the distribution valve is best determined by each particular case with a careful inspection trial where conditions are severe and distributing valve exposed to the extremities of weather, dirt, and so on, including oil and testing, will require shorter intervals within where the conditions are more favorable, but under their most severe conditions, the interval should be not larger than 3 months. The following is method of lubrication of the distributing valves. Equalizing portion. The equalizing slide valve, the graduating valve of the head and their seat shall be lubricated with the dry graphite after the bearing surfaces have been properly rubbed and the free use of the oil, and they should be wiped clean of the soft cloth and soft the material. Oil and gum and grease should be thoroughly removed from all the valves and their seats. Before replacing the equalizing piston, the piston ring should be immersed with clean and gasoline, then thoroughly blown off with air and wiped dry with a clean cloth. Piston bushing should be thoroughly cleaned with a cloth saturated with a good grade of lubrication, oil filling the pores of the metal with the oil, and then lubricated with a clean cloth. Before the clean piston, or replace the piston bushings, and 3 drops of approved oil must be replaced in the groove and the ring moved to distribute the oil and insert the piston and the slide valve of the body, leaving them in the innermost position, lubricating piston bushings sparingly, the piston back and forth several times after the remove of the surplus oil with the outer edge of the bush. The face of the graduating valve with both upper and lower face of the equalizing valve with the equalizing valve seat. The upper portion of the bushing where their equalizing valve spring and bears should be lubricated with a high grade of very fine, dry, pure graphite, rubbing it into only the parts showing the dark copper color. To apply the graphite, use a stick in the shape of the paddle, about 8 inches long, having a smaller piece of the chasmoias glued to one end. Put a small amount of graphite into the chasmoias skin, rub it on the surface, special leave no graphite on the surfaces. When the work is completed, the graduating equalizing valve seats must be entirely free of the oil and grease. Care should be taken so when handled, the parts of the lubricating the hands do not come in contact with the lubricated pads. The thin coating of the graphite are easily removed. The application portion. The exhaust valve and the seat of the application valve with the seat of number 6E application portion should be cleaned with rubbed into the sparing lubricated with the graphite grease. This populated type of the application valve with the number 6KDR distributing valve should be cleansed or seat replaced if defective before applying the piston with the application portion. Clean the application cylinder and piston. Lubricate the walls of the cylinder, piston, and piston rings. Use the good grade of lubricant special prepared for the purpose. The feeding valve and reducing valve. The only part of the feeding valve and reducing valve requiring lubrication is in the slide valve, which should be lubricated with dry graphite. The Type F brake application. The piston and slide valve should be cleaned with lubricated with the same manner as described for the equalizing portion. The distributing valve diaphragm should be inspected, replaced if found defective. The strainer and the unit of the dead engine features should be cleaned. And also double check valves. If the double check valve and end seats are defective, they should be replaced. Testing locomotive brakes. In preparing a locomotive for the service before making the following test, follow the carefully rules about operating given under the heading of charging. Test number 1. The system is charged with the governor's stop of the compressor note with which leach occurs with the surface exhaust port of the automatic portion of the brake valve with the handle with release running of the holding lap position. Leakage at the point of the indicates the equalizing discharge of the valve is leaking. If this leak is due to foreign matter on the valve seat, it can be usually displaced and closing the cutout cock underneath the brake valve, making the heavy service application, returning the handle to the release position. The head blow causes the exhaust fitting usually removes the obstacles, allows the equalizing piston valve to seat. Test number 2. Place the handle with the automatic portion of the brake valve in the service application. Allowed to remain until the brake pipe pressure is entirely exhausted and indicated with the gauge handle, after which the place of the handle to the lap position. Note if there is a leakage in the rotary valve, which will be indicated with the fouls. Increase the brake pipe pressure will cause the blow of the service exhaust fitting. Will increase the equalizing reserve pressure and will cause the equalizing preserve gauge to register and increase the pressure of an application chamber of the distributing valve and will cause an increase in the brake cylinder pressure of the intermittent blow of the safety valve. Test number 3. Make a partial service application with the independent brake portion of the brake valve when the lap of the valve with the brake cylinder pressure increases up to the amount of which the reducing valve is adjusted. The indicated leakage of the independent rotary valve and the brake cylinder pressure increase of the brake pipe pressure and the indicating leakage of the distributing valve and equalizing the slide of the valve. Testing number 14. If after the service application locomotive brake relieves the air leaking from the application cylinder pipe leakage at the brake cylinder exhaust port of the distributing valve of the locomotive brakes are applied with indicating a leaky exhaust valve and increasing the pressure above the portion putting the brake cylinder at the time of the application blowing of the safety valve, and it should indicate that the application valve is leaking, and should there be a blow at the exhaust of the automatic portion of the brake valve when the both handles with the running position, it indicates leakage past the equalizing slide valve. A leaking graduate valve may be detected by increasing brake cylinder pressure by the handling of the automatic portion of the brake valve in the lap position after the ordinary service brake application, provided with the reduction insufficient to give an equalization between the pressure chamber and application cylinder. Alright, troubles and remedies. Broken pipes. The main reserve pipe. If the main reserve pipe breaks between the reserve and the branch of the distributing valve in such a way that it cannot be repaired, the locomotive brake cannot be applied by either the brake or the valve. The brake is not between the brake valve and the brake pipe leading to the distributing valve. Both sides of the main reserve pipe should be plugged, and the locomotive brakes can be operated in the usual manner with the independent brake valve. The main reserve brake branch pipes. If the branch pipe from the main reserve pipe of the distributing valve breaks between the main reserve pipe and the cutout cock of the plug of the main reserve side of the brake and closes out the brake branch pipe cutout cock, then the locomotive brakes then are inoperative. The train brakes can be operated in the usual manner. If the brake pipe leading to the feeding valve and the reducing the valve breaks, both sides must be plugged. This cuts out the independent brake valve and the use of the running for the release and the recharging of the train brakes. Hold position automatic brake valve as then there would be no pressure on top of the independent rotary valve to hold the valve into seat. It would be impossible to secure an automatic application of the locomotive. To remedy this, move the independent brake valve to the handle with the slow application position before applying the brakes and leaving it there until it is desired again to release the locomotive brakes. When the automatic brakes are released, return the independent brake valve to handle with the running position. The train brakes are released and recharged with the automatic brake valve handled with the release position. The locomotive brakes can be released and moved to the handle of the automatic brake valve to running position or release position by the independent brake valve. The prevent too high in brake pipe pressure with automatic brake valve handle is in release position to the compressor and must be stopped by means of the control switch. If the breach occurs between the reducing valve and the branch piping leading to the feed valve, plug both sides of the pipe. This cuts off the independent brake valve. This does not interfere with the handling of the locomotive and the train brakes of the automatic brake valve, except for the independent brake valve must be manipulated as described in the preceding paragraph. When the pipe is broken beyond the feed valve, the reducing valve, it is not necessary to plug the pipe leading from the valves. The same result can be accomplished by turning and adjusting not sufficiently to loosen the regulating spring and cause the blow of the main reserve air to cease. Another remedy is the case of the pipe is broken beyond the reducing valve and slack off the reducing valve with the adjusting nut, and is just described. The plug of the broken pipe would be in the independent brake valve. The plug exhaust port in the bottom of the brake valve. The independent brake valve handle should be then kept in a running position. The locomotive brakes can be then operated by automatic brake valve. Alright, the brake pipe. In case of the broken brake pipe branch, the distributing valve of the plug at the end and leading of the brake pipe, the train brakes may be operated within the usual manner. The locomotive brakes can be operated with the independent brake valve in the ordinary way, except that the release position must be always be used to release it. If the brake is in the head of the branch to the distributing valve on the side of the brake may be plugged without affecting the brake branch. If the braking occurs between the brake pipe to the distributing valve of the brake and automatic brake valve, the plug of the pipe is above. It will be impossible to apply the release brakes by the automatic brake valve, but they may be applied and released by the independent brake valve. Brake cylinder pressure. A broken brake cylinder permits the escape of the main reserve air pressure for the brake and may cause the release from one or more locomotive brake cylinders depending on where the break occurs. If the brake cannot be repaired close to the cutoff pin of the pipe leading of the broken pipe, the break occurs necessary to distributing valve of the reserve close of the cutout cock of the main reserve of the supply pipe of the distributing valve. The application cylinder pipe. If the application cylinder pipe breaks, the plug of the pipe of the distributing valve side of the pipe brake. If the brake occurs between the distributing valve and the T of the independent and automatic brake valve, the locomotive brakes cannot be applied with the independent brake valve, and the emergency maintaining feature is lost. The locomotive brakes can, however, be applied usually by an automatic brake valve released by the valve in running position. If the brake is between the automatic valve and the T, the independent brake valve can be applied with the release in the usual way, with the emergency maintaining feature is lost. If the brake occurs between the T and the independent brake valve, the locomotive can be applied and the independent brake valve and the emergency maintaining feature is retained. Distributing valve release pipe. If the release of the pipe breaks, the holding of the feature is lost, and it is also impossible to keep the locomotive brakes fully applied with the independent brake valve unless the opening of the distributing valve side of the brake is closed. There should not be done except possibly in switching services, which independent brake valve is mostly used. It is necessary to use the release position of the independent brake valve at all times when it is desired to release the locomotive brakes. On the road locomotive, the distributing valve side of the brake should be left open, and the brakes should be controlled by the automatic brake valve until the repairs can be made. Alright, your equalizing reserve pipe. In case of the breakage equalizing reserve pipe, plug the pipe at the brake valve union. Also plug of the brake pipe service exhaust, then apply the brakes and move the handle of the automatic brake valve gradually toward the emergency position, making the desired brake pipe service reduction gradually. Direct the return of the handle gradually to the lap position. Alright, and then there is a couple diaphragms, like the releasing and the running position, with the automatic service position, automatic service lap position. The release of the K2 automatic service, release of the automatic service, release of the holding automatic release, emergency position, emergency lap position, independent application position, independent lap position, independent release position, independent release, independent application. Piping diagram of the number HEL brake equipment with the KB brake valve original. Piping diagram single and number 4 LEH braking K14E brake valve. Number 17 and a 14EL brake equipment with number 6 daycare disable. Another diagram. I'm planning on going over these in another video, but not for this sake, not now. Piping diagram of the double-ended number 14 EL locomotive brake equipment safety control features. A diagram of view of the safety control feature of number double-ended number 14 LL brake equipment. Diagram of multiple unit operation dynamic interlocking H6A relay valve limits. And that takes care of. This is the this takes care of the number 14 brake equipment for diesel electric switching locomotives. Westinghouse Air Brake or Wabco.